We're at the Discovery Center in Pocomoke City, Maryland, with the Pocomoke Indian Nation today. We're going to be talking about something that's known as flintknapping in modern times. The native people would not have called it that. Flintknapping is something that came from breaking stone, and this is what we do with making arrowheads and such things as knives and whatever. It's called lithic reduction, meaning taking a piece of rock that is cryptocrystalline in nature and breaks similar to what glass would break today. So if you can do it with one piece of stone, you can do it with any of those varieties of stone. And here on Delmarva, Earth Mother has brought down from the mountains, the Appalachian Mountains, for millions of years, have rolled down rivers. This nodule can be broke right on the site where you find it, if you find a larger stone, by just banging down on it and splitting pieces off. Or we could take a hammer stone and try to work into this piece. Hopefully we're going to break off some smaller flakes so we can make some smaller arrowheads and drill bits or whatever. So just on the beach, by just hammering this off, we would break into this piece of stone. Also on Delmarva, there's quite a bit of quartzite. And quartzite is a piece of stone that's a metamorphic. It's brought back together. It's similar to sand that's being recompressed and heated. These are ideal, and we find a lot of original artifacts in this area made from this material. You can also pick up a hammerstone on the beach, something small, okay? And we could actually, another very important thing in what we call flintknapping today is called a braiding. If I just merely hit this piece of stone on the beach, I'll break off a very small piece. What I need to do is abrade that by dulling that edge. When we get done with the knife or point or whatever, we would not do this. We would leave that very sharp edge, but now I've actually dulled that edge down and can break pieces off like so. Start to work this into a shape that we're looking for, okay? This is quartzite. Also, it's known that quartzite, and we find a lot of evidences on the beaches on the Delmarva Peninsula, is that people would put these in a fire while they're cooking or whatever, leave it there for several days, buried into the sand under the fire. And it changes the characteristics of the stone, called heat treating today is what we call it. They learned that probably by accident, but found out that that stone does work a whole lot better if it's been heat treated. Another thing that's confused to people is the fact that not everything is an arrow. We call it arrowheads, and arrowheads are what were put on what was shot with a bow and arrow. That is an arrowhead, and we have examples of arrowheads here, okay? Some very small, which can be put on darts made of quartz. Another abundant product that being found on the Pocomoke watershed is quartz. There's quite a bit of quartz, and it works very well. Also a cryptocrystalline piece of material. Also, there's drill bits, is another thing. Knives, spears, all sorts of things that we're manufacturing. This is a spear, and this would go back into very early times, although it was probably still used by the Pocomoke people in later times. Would go on a long shaft, and it would be inserted into that shaft and thrown with an atlatl, which we're not displaying today, which is an extension of your arm, and we can throw it at a greater distance with a lot more thrust. So not just an arrowhead, this would be known as a spear. Another thing that we definitely need is a knife, and this is a knife, and this has been made of a piece of chert. There is chert here in nodule forms, okay? Most of the stone that we would find in this area would be in a nodule form, so we gotta work our way into that material. And another thing with this type of process is nothing is wasted. The pieces that come off of these, that flake off of these pieces, are very sharp. The piece right here is extremely sharp and will actually cut leather. So we can use it as like an X-Acto knife today. This breaks down to the very molecule and is extremely sharp. So if I were going to make an arrow, get me some turkey feathers. This is a piece of arrow wood or verbenum It grows on the Delmarva Peninsula. And when we first harvest it, it's bent, it's crooked, and we have to straighten it. We heat it, keep working on it. But we also want the bark off. So a piece that came off making of the knife, for instance, okay, a big flake when it was on a big nodule like this, may fly off like that. This is perfect for what we're trying to do. So we're trying to take the bark off this. And there's not a tool in your workshop that would work any better than this. It'll actually work this down into a shaft. We can even take material off and make it thinner. Another problem we would have is making a notch. So if I take a piece and notch it, actually we get onto a big tree stump or something like that, works ideal. And we would take a small piece like so, and on the back side with a piece of deer antler, we can actually take and serrate an edge. And what I'm doing is just pushing in and down, and in and down, and down, and then turn it over and go the other way. And now what I'm making is like a sawtooth. And now that we can saw, here we go. We can actually use that to cut off the shaft. Now we've actually made a small saw. So if we're making flutes, we're making shafts, or we're cutting notches, we just had a tool from a waste product, so we don't throw anything away. Now the actual process of making something from the beginning is to break into a nodule here, okay, or to trade something from further up in the Pennsylvania and upper parts of Delaware. We have materials that can be traded down and probably would come in a nodule form, or something that's already been worked down quite a bit, making a nice trade item that we would refine even further. In the situation with the knife, for instance, this knife right now will cut wood. I can actually use it as a saw. So if I'm making a fireboard to start a fire, this is a tool that I would use. If I pick up a piece of fruit, it's perfect for that as well. We can also eat some deer meat around the campfire tonight, and this can be my knife. And stone is easy to wash and doesn't hold bacteria, so it's a perfect thing for that, okay? So knives. Another thing is drill bits, because we do drill stone and shells and all sorts of things that need to be drilled. So the Flintknapping again is making, if you found this as an artifact, you might think that it's an arrow point, but in reality it's probably a drill point. And we have all different kinds of drill points. So this would allow us to drill wood, this would allow us to drill stone. There's a flywheel on here, and we're going to make this bit by Flintknapping. Get a little depression started here. And with plenty of patience, we can drill a hole in a piece of wood, we can drill a hole in a piece of stone, we can drill a hole in a shell. So Flintknapping again is making bits, not just arrow points. So the actual process is to, regardless of what we're making, there's two parts to Flintknapping, actually three parts in a way. I was talking about a braiding, and also there's a center line on anything you're working on, and this is very important to learn, is you must hit below center, not on top, because you could actually, with this large hammerstone, break this piece right in half, the first crack. So it's a little bit about studying and learning the stone and what we need to do next, and sometimes that can be a little confusing. But the first thing we got to do is get rid of that original sharp edge. We got to kill that sharp edge. And if you see there's some sparks, you see sparks a lot of times. Probably how the native people realized if you could take two stones and make a spark, you can actually see those sparks. So now we've actually dulled that edge down, and with a medium-sized hammerstone against my leg with a piece of leather, I'm supporting so I don't break the whole piece. And we're going to see if we can knock a piece off here. And we can. And if you see these pieces that came off, This is a percussion flake, and you can see that large flake that went across there. It's in many pieces, but that's what I just took off right here. And what I'm trying to do is we're going to thin this whole thing down. We've got to get it down very thin in order to get to this. So we got a little bit of work to do. But remember, the pieces that fly off are X-Acto knives. They will actually cut that piece of leather just as nice as you want. A little bit hard to see on the camera there, but you can see we can cut that. This would also be, now that we just worked on a shaft that we had a piece of material left over, is a scraper. Now we got this real small sharp piece. Now we need to put some turkey feathers on this shaft a little bit later on here, okay? And there's another whole story about making glues and things like that. But another important thing, and we get asked this quite a bit, is how do you take and split a feather? Well, with the X-Acto knife, right down on this stump, I can actually pull that right through that feather, and I can split that feather. Because this debbage is really a tool. It's a waste product in what we're trying to develop here, but in reality it's a tool. So you've already seen knives, very sharp little knives, you've seen scrapers, you've seen saws. So if we're making a flute out of cane, this is the tool you would need. And we can also take that tool and with a deer antler, we can break this point, and again we got to abrade that, remember, because I need to get a little blade. I'm going to take this little point right out here, okay, and I'm going to peel that edge. And now I'm going to try to shape that into something that's a little bit smaller, almost like a chisel. Let me do that pretty quickly. And we end up with like a little chisel, okay? And this is what we would cut into a piece of cane to make a flute, okay? So I can make my own tools and make them in the field with no more than a deer antler and a couple stones we picked up on the beach. So Earth Mothers give us not only the material to work with, but also the tools that we need to work with, including the deer antler, okay? Also, another thing that works very well is a piece of deer bone. And we can take on a large piece of sandstone because we have plenty of patience, and we can actually work this down to a fairly sharp edge. And it also works very well for what is called pressure flaking, which is how we refine something. So we'll go over on this edge here, and we can break a very small notch in there. It's a little hard probably for the camera to see, but that just had one push. Now I would turn it over and do the other side. And keep going back and forth and making the notch even larger. This is how we actually refine an arrowhead, and to get these notches that you see here are done this very way. We can also take a small piece of sandstone, not that one, this piece here would work, and go into that notch and abrade that again. Remember, we need to braid in order to get a good bite on the stone. So that would be a process of getting ready to go in with another deer antler here. And this is how we would put the notch into an arrowhead. This one's all done, but you can see we just keep turning over, back and forth, and we eat our way into that piece of stone. So now back to this, when we get to a certain point, we'd probably want a smaller stone, okay? And you can see now we've got what we call a platform right here, which is actually down below the center. So if I braid that, now I've got an actual area that I can hit and take that piece right off of there. And now we'll flip it over. We would abrade it again. See the spark flying. I can actually hold it in the air and do it as well. You see that piece that flew off right here? Okay. And now, since I've hit here, I've made a new platform that's below center on the other side. Back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. is how you get to there. Okay? Another tool that's used, this is a piece of antler from an animal that would be much further north. It also works pretty good when you're napping, especially with the percussion. And this is a piece of material that is not on Delmarva. It's something that we would actually trade. It's called dacite. For demonstrations, it's a nice stone to work with. You see the piece I just knocked off. So now we're going back and forth, and watching this has got turned into a drill bit or knife or an arrowhead or whatever. So we're constantly studying the stone. We've got a place here that's very fat, which is a platform, so we're okay with that. Now we're going to do a braid again, and this time we'll probably use this particular stone. And you see the piece that came off. Now what it's done is it's actually thinned the whole piece out. That's what we're looking for. Now we're looking for another, and now we got another tool, and that is extremely sharp. So now we're studying the stone. We're going to end up, we're getting pretty thin in here, and we're looking for the next place to go, and which is probably going to be right there. We'll use a smaller piece for that. If you notice, I've got no gloves on right now, but the native people, we don't know whether they actually wore gloves or not, but in modern times, we should use glasses, we should use gloves. We're doing a video here, we're trying to be very careful, but if you try this at home, make sure that you stay safe. Also, another problem with this process of napping is to be very careful when we're on a day when it's a lot of sun outside, and you're doing this, you can see this little bit of material coming off that we can breathe, and that's not good for you. We don't want to be breathing these small pieces of silica. It causes pneumon-ulcer microscopic silico-volcanic coniosis, which is a word that means silicon down in the lungs. That's a long word, but one of the longest words I think in the dictionary, but I learned that a long time ago. So you can see flint napping is a process for doing a lot of different things, not just making an arrowhead. And people that collect artifacts, archaeologists, when you're finding something, it's not always something you would shoot with a bow, not something you would always throw with a spear. So it has many other tools on that. So anyhow, thank you for watching today, and appreciate it. We're in the Discovery Center in Pocomoke City, Maryland, on the Great Pocomoke River with Pocomoke Indian Nation. Thank you.